this is becoming a printing town. This is no longer that city that, that people were like, oh, you just go there to get stabbed.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 25th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release an episode every 2 weeks, and on the off weeks, I publish an article on the Pine Copper Lime website which features images and maybe a bit more information about the artist I'm going to interview. 25! That is a quarter of a century in podcast episodes. It really makes a girl think. And truly, I have spent this past week thinking about how grateful I am for the reception of PCL this past year. But I'm sure there will be much more on all of that in a long, mushy soliloquy next week for our 1-year anniversary episode. Don't you worry. I was delighted to see new Patreon supporters sign up this week. Again, you know who you are and that you are my heroes. Truly amazing. Just let me know if you ever need a ride from the airport, someone to read over your grant proposal, or to be your lover's alibi. You know where to find me. I'm on Instagram at pine.copper.lime. Also, I want to give a little love this week to those of you supporting the podcast in other ways, like telling friends, forcing your students to listen, or leaving reviews on your podcast app of choice. Like this one from Waterpaint on the iTunes podcast app. Listening to Miranda's interviews is like stopping in for a chat and a tour of small print shops around the world. Listening to artists talk about their background, process, inspiration, and goals is fascinating and gets the creative ideas flowing. Subscribe now, you won't regret it. You guys are the best. My guest this week is Reinaldo Gil Zambrano. He's a community builder, lecturer, printmaker, storyteller, and printmaking advocate. We talk about his childhood growing up in Caracas, Venezuela, when he left home at 16 to study in Costa Rica, learning about illustration as visual communication, and finding a sense of home through all of these changes. We also talk about the amazing things he's doing to build a spectacular printmaking community in his new hometown of Spokane, Washington. Oh, and you best believe we'll be doing a double release on this one. So stay tuned for the Spanish version of this episode coming out in the next few days. But for now, sit back, relax, and prepare for some top-notch storytelling with Reinaldo Zambrano. Hi, Reinaldo. How's it going?
Oh, hello, Miranda. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are things in Spokane?
Things in the Spokane are great. Like, I cannot be happier of how exciting this city is becoming.
Wonderful. I can't wait to learn about that because I grew up in Washington State and we'll definitely dive into it. But Spokane, when I was a kid in the 90s, was something that you just see on Cops, the TV show. But I really am been hearing great things about that growing scene with the arts community and people building things. So I would love to hear about that a little bit later on. So I know your work, really just from seeing you around the internet, and we've definitely have some mutual friends in common. But for people who aren't familiar with you, why don't you just kind of let people know who you are, where you are, and what you do questions.
Yeah, well, my name is Reinaldo Gil Zambrano. I am a printmaking artist and educator from Caracas, Venezuela. I grew up in Caracas. I went to school there until I was 16 years old. I moved to Costa Rica, and then somehow I continued moving to go to school, and I ended up in Idaho. So then after that, I got married in Moscow, Idaho, and then I moved into Spokane, where I currently work and live. I teach out of Eastern Washington University, and I also produce my work out of the Spokane Print and Publishing Center currently. And I specialize in relief print in large and small scale, and also intaglio printing.
Beautiful. So you said that you were born in Venezuela and you grew up there. And how old were you when you moved away?
So I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, and I moved the first time out of the country. I was 16 years old when I got a scholarship to go to the United World Colleges, the one located in Costa Rica. Yeah, and that was the first time moving out of the house by myself and living in a different country.
Yeah, and it's 16. That's pretty
Yeah.
young. Tell me a little bit about what role art played in your life when you were growing up.
Yeah, well, I mean, since I remember, I always loved to draw. I was always drawing on the walls of my parents' apartment where I grew up. I was drawing on my notebooks. I was pretty much drawing everywhere since I remember. Always trying to, copy my favorite cartoons like Digimon, like Dragon
Mm-hmm.
Ball and all
Mm-hmm.
that. But also my mom, she pretty much brought me a lot of children books that these artists from Venezuela, Rosana Farias, who I really admire, she illustrated them, and they really shaped me. I learned how to read through illustrator books, and I grew up fascinated about the storytelling that they can carry, like how these images somehow open the imagination and reinforce the message that is later on written. I
Mm-hmm.
grew up with fascinated with them, and I always wanted to become a children book illustrator, actually. And that's when I went to school. I was pursuing that, but my parents always were really encouraged. And they support me a lot. They always bought me like charcoals or temperas or acrylic paint, and they even like allow me to paint my walls and everything growing up.
Oh, I love
So
it.
so yeah, so I was really lucky to have parents like that that just allowed me to explore my visual language, and later on that got refined when I moved out.
What was it like to leave the house at 16 and move away and start something like that?
Oh, it was amazing. Like
Mm.
so in Venezuela, the biggest industry is the oil industry. So everybody back then wanted to be an engineer or a chemical engineer, everything related to the oil industry, or a doctor or a lawyer. So there was not a lot of like opportunities for the arts somehow, like where I grew up. So
Hmm.
my parents somehow like talk to me, and they say like, well, you're gonna go and do the science bachelor, like you're gonna get your high school in science, and then you can do whatever you want. So but I mean, I went to school that was more related to the science, and I got my ass kicked with with biology, with chemistry and physics and all that, but I survived. But even when I was doing all this stuff that I didn't want to do, I was always drawing, doing projects, inside my class, and painting teachers for people, or painting like backdrops for theater plays and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. So then, like, I was getting ready to become the worst architecture ever, because that was the idea that I was going to study that in Venezuela, because it was related to art somehow, I guess.
Yeah.
And then when I got this scholarship to go to Costa Rica to the United World College there, it just opened up so many opportunities. I went there, and it was an opportunity to study arts. And also that was the moment that somehow I discovered that I could use my illustration or my visual narrative as a way to communicate myself and my ideas. Because these schools, they were 75 people from 72 different countries.
Wow.
And I didn't speak English in the moment, or French, that were the main languages there besides Spanish. So it was great. Like, I mean, that was the main moment that I realized the potential that illustration or drawings or art had to somehow create those links between people, and also find those common grounds between all of us, even when we were coming from different backgrounds. Even beyond the limitations of our language, we were able to somehow share and find these common experiences and share them and laugh, and become friends. So that was definitely the best 2 years of my life, like
Oh,
16 to 18, when I was in this school.
I love that you've painted such an amazing story there about all of these kids from all over the world coming together, and the way that you can communicate if you can't use words is through visual communication. I think that's what an incredible experience to have, particularly at that age when it really will be so affecting. I think that's so wonderful.
Exactly. Yeah, no, that was really like eye-opening. It somehow reinforced what I knew before, like somehow. So it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then, how did you come from illustration to printmaking?
I was in undergrad and I had a printmaking class with artist Matt Boudin, who is a printmaker now out of Chicago. But that class didn't really resonate that much. I remember that I did the process, but I didn't really follow through. But it was until I went to grad school. And in my first year there at the University of Idaho, I met this guy called Tim Hahn, who is a fellow classmate. And then like he showed me, because I was doing these large drawings, charcoal drawings. And then like he told me like, hey, like, have you tried relief printing? And I was like, yeah, I think so, but not really. I didn't get really into that. So he showed me Korean wood blocks, a bunch of prints that he brought from Korea. And he gave me my first tool that I still use and a block of NDF. And he told me, you should probably try, because it feels that you're trying to somehow make in your drawings this graphic quality that is possible to get through a relief. So I just started drawing in the block, and I carved this really crappy drawing of a fish with a gas mask, which has been this thing that I have been doing forever, that now became the icon of my print shop. So yeah, so I did that thing, and it was okay, this is fine. It took me a while. And then when I printed, that was the moment. When I pulled that print, somehow I just got hooked on. My professor in the moment, Mike Sonixen from the University of Idaho, he told me, yeah, man, like you just got into the dark side of printmaking, like that's what happens.
He he saw the look in your eye and was like, oh no, he's another lifer. Like, yeah.
Exactly. He was just looking at me like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I know that look. Yeah.
So that's how, exactly. And that's how I got into it. That was in 2014, and I have been printing since then, and discovering more, like studying more and getting to know more people, and it's been fascinating.
Yeah. And so it seems like now you're mostly do relief. Have I seen litho recently, like coming out of your studio, or is that your work as well?
Yes. So what happened is I got invited by Gregory Santos. So yeah, it's been great because I did some litho out of the University of Idaho. But, all the equipment and all that, I haven't really done it that much. I did some pronto plates after I took a workshop with Professor Kevin Haas during the Spokane Print Fest. Then, and now I did that mixed grid project. And now I'm looking forward to receive those prints back and see how that turned out. So, yeah, so Gregory Santos got me again into that process.
Beautiful. Outside of that kind of that little foray into litho, it sounds like that you still are relief as your main.
Yes.
How would you kind of just generally describe your current practice?
I have been just diving into just narrative. So I think I need to go back a little bit, and I know that this might be a long answer, but I'm going to try to summarize it. So the idea of, Latin America in general, especially Venezuela, Latin America in general, I grew up in an environment that telling stories is our daily thing. That is like the treat that you get when you bring people to your table. When you bring new family members or friends into your table to eat, you will always share a story. And that was the thing that I loved the most growing up. So that storytelling is somehow something that I keep celebrating through my work. So I pretty much am a sponge. I establish conversation with people around me through music, also to reading, or just buy a casual beer, or or maybe we're in Washington, so possibly a joint or maybe a coffee, something like that. And then like those stories somehow start to grow in my head. And then I develop those into a visual narrative into my blogs, that they become more and more intricate the more that I draw them. And then I allow them to evolve in using my carving tool and become with a different mark making that my drawing cannot fully render. So the mark making of the tool like just gives them an extra physical appearance that later on is reinforced by the printing. So basically, they're just visual narratives that tell a story in just one frame so far, and they go beyond the limitations of the written language. So they're wordless. Usually, I mean, they are big because I just enjoy working large. It gives me more freedom of using my body language on my mark making when I draw. And also, I just love, because I'm fascinated with murals. So I just love work that can somehow absorb you. So that's basically what I have been doing so far. And I have been playing also with color and also pushing that boundary of like, okay, prints are usually black and white and they tend to be flat. However, after I study under Tom Hawk, he like was always telling us like, you need to push dimension. So that's when you start doing, the diamond cuts and things like that to develop midtones in order to create a sense of depth into that two-dimensionality. So it's basically that. So doing all those different approaches in order to make an immersive narrative. That's basically what I like to do.
I'd love to hear you speak a little bit more to this idea of the visual language transcending verbal communication, because as somebody who we talked a little bit about before, my background is in philosophy of art originally, and so I love that idea, and I have got all kinds of like my own theories about it, but I it's something I really believe in. So I'd love to just do a little bit more of a deep dive into what you think that really means and what advantages visual communication has and what exactly can it get at that we're lacking in verbal communication.
Yeah, I feel that, I mean, it happens when we get to know each other. When we get to meet people, we just see the external part, right? We see their faces. And this is something that I explore also into my series of inner portraits, where I just play with the face to be a mask, and then the body is just created by all these different stories or bodies or other elements that somehow expose the inner world of the person. So when that happens, you make those connections with others, that somehow like they get limited to the cultural backgrounds of the people and also the faces or or the language. So this is an experience that happened to me in undergrad when I did this really large drawing for an installation for my undergrad show. I did the barrios from Venezuela, which are the favelas or slums, with a sunset. And I draw them, and then one lady from Palestine came, and she was, "Oh, that's exactly where I come from." So that was like, wow. So, and there was something else that happened when I was in Costa Rica. I draw this series of fruits that had a zipper, and they were somehow like connected. Oh, that's exactly like the fruit that we have back home because they have all this genetic modification and stuff like that. So I noticed that when you have images like when you have stories that are just visual, somehow make those connections and they go beyond that limitation that maybe the cultural background can create, and people will just associate them with their personal experience and open up those stories and create that dialogue with them. So that's something that I feel that is just so important that I want to keep exploring into my work. I have one of my pieces that is it's called La Sopa, or the soup, like my mom used to say, o como mi mamá decía. It's a bowl of soup the bowl of soup is, there is a barrio, a city coming out from it. And it's great to see because that is a piece that talks about, like memories and being able to transport yourself when you eat something that just resonates with you and reminds you from your childhood. But I mean, like I have heard so many people like looking at that and just getting it into their own personal experiences and telling us about how maybe like they associated with like social issues, that happened to them before, and also like to specific dishes that they used to eat when they were kids, and they can like assimilate that, or even like pollution or issues like that related to how food is modified and is being affecting people in a different way. I feel that there is something very important there. Like, I mean, because my visual work comes from, I mean, many things are coming from my background from Venezuela, but also experiences from here and also experiences from Costa Rica and all the other stories that are somehow becoming part of my world, you know, like the people that I get to know around here too. So all those things come together into this pod, become part of a visual narrative that later on they can also find themselves identify with.
Right. And I think that, yeah, what you're touching on, which is really significant when it comes to the visual versus verbal communication, is that verbal communication is so, in a way, prescriptive. So I'm imbuing the meaning as the communication is happening in this way that it becomes really specific. And it's like, I'm telling you what this means. And I think that we're so focused on just understanding when somebody's talking to us that, well, we obviously take it and process it. There's not that same kind of intimacy that happens when you're looking at visual communication and it hits you all at once. It's not linear in its narrative.
Exactly.
You see the whole image,
Exactly.
and then you come to it halfway with your own experiences to form the meaning. And that is where it happens. And I'm sure that arguments could be made that, you know, like short stories and that sort of thing, people bring it, and, you know, not to downplay that experience in written arts, but there's something about visual communication has become so personal that people tend to really bring their own baggage to it, but not in a negative way. You know?
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes, you know, that communication is a feeling. They just have this feeling inside that they don't know how to explain. They just get it. And that's the thing. Like, sometimes I feel that visual narrative produce this kind of reactions on people that we know exactly how they're feeling, but we don't know how to explain it or put it into words because, as you say, they can limit it somehow.
Yeah, somehow words make people feel specific. Like it's
Exactly.
and images make people feel broad and inclusive in a way. And I wonder if it has to do with the fact that there's a little bit of separation from the creator in a visual language. So, you know, if I'm just standing in front of you and I'm telling you a story, I'm a specific entity in that communication. Whereas if you know, I created an image and then you're seeing it on a gallery wall, I'm not there. So it really feels like there's this communication that's almost strictly happening between the object that's created and the perceiver. That maybe that's part of what allows it to go. So that's beautiful, and that kind of universality that it allows is one of the very best things about visual communication.
But now, you know, like currently, I have been exploring also collaborating with writers.
Ooh, tell us about that.
So I have been recently experimenting with collaborations with writers. You know, I did a collaboration with Luke Baumgarten, who is a local artist or local writer. So I give him one of my pieces, and for him to react, and then he gave me one of his written pieces, and then like we just reacted to it. He wrote a short story about my piece, and I did an illustration or a relief print about his work, and then we put them together into a show, and we just realized, you know, like all the common things that we had. Me growing up in Venezuela and him growing up out of a small town here in Spokane, and how we have this common experience with magical realism, even when our cultures are so different. So that was great. And then I did this collaboration with Sharma Shields. We were 16 different artists from Spokane. We took several different parts of a poem. Actually, it was a short story that she wrote called The Lake Witch. And then we just reacted, and we found also these common grounds into magical realism too. And it was just great. And it just makes me wonder, about what else can happen there, if we continue collaborating and just allowing people to write about this illustration, and also me like illustrating these ones, and see what else can evolve from there. Finding all these different common points between like two different cultures, two cultures that are so opposite, but somehow like have something in common, which is this idea of explaining or telling or sharing these extraordinary events in a way that is just ordinary. It happens around us, like magical realism celebrates. So that's something that I feel that we're going to be doing more pretty soon too. So that's another way to also explore my own work. So yeah,
I'd love to hear you speak to magical realism specifically a little bit, because I know it does come into play in your work. I've heard the phrase, but only really know what it means kind of in a vague way. So I'd love to explore it really in context of your imagery, or within your collaboration, or whatever you think is best.
Yeah, sure. So I was having this conversation with one of my good friends called Luis Reyes. He's an artist, a writer, anthropologist from Peru. We met in the College of Idaho University, the United World College, actually, in Costa Rica. We were talking about magical realism and how that is so embedded into Latin America, the way that we tell stories. We just like take something that is so common, but we give it an extra to it. There is a sense of hyperbole, but there is also a sense of narrative and enthusiasm, and just like a little bit of exaggeration to make it memorable, so those things can prevail and defy time and just continue living forever. So for example, we have this moment that happened. One of my cousins ran through a glass door once when we were kids, and that's something that my family still continue talking. But I just love the way that the people in my family tell that story. You can just envision in your head that these group of kids walking or running into a slow motion, and then there was this hit that sounded like a thunder that make everybody in the house shake. And everybody just turn around and start getting that feeling inside in their backs. And then this kid just goes through, and all the glass was spread out, has, pieces of candy everywhere from a piñata that no one wants to eat because it's sharp, right? And then this kid will jump, and then what happened is like he will just recover from each hit that everybody was just so scared that he actually might die from. And he surprisingly has just like 2 cuts behind his knees. He defied death in that moment. And now that became, that memorable moment that made him a hero in our family. It's just the way that people tell stories and they embody them. And they just get so into it. And the storyteller becomes part of the story too. And then they just illustrate all that into your head. The stories they're common things, they're common characters, but they become bigger than life, and they resonate in our memory forever. So I feel that's something that just makes commonality becomes extraordinary. That's something that I want to give back in my work too. I want to be also using printmaking not only as a community building tool, but an education tool, but also as a storytelling tool that keeps these stories alive forever and give them beyond those languages that, that cannot be written on. The stories that I know how to write about. I don't know how to write it into a way that in English or Spanish, so I just make them into an image, and they can prevail and continue being spread after that.
I think that's a wonderful illustration. So I think that might be a good transition to my next question, actually, which is that
Sure.
I feel like the idea of home comes up a lot in your work and seems sort of central to part of what you do. Would you say that's accurate? And if so, would you speak to it a little bit?
Definitely, yeah, no. My work also explored the universal idea of home, what exactly it means, right? Is home, because I have been moving so much.
Yeah.
Like, it makes me wonder what exactly it is. Is the place where I grew up? Is the house? Is the material parts, or is the people around me. So since I first moved out of my parents' house when I was 16, I have been trying to find that. And I have been realizing that it's a combination of things. It's like this world. When this specific space, time, all the different elements that just come together into that specific time and place, they become that world, and that world becomes later on home. Like there is the inner home that we all carry inside ourselves that we can share with people eventually, and there is also the external home that is that specific time and place that where we are growing or becoming the person that we're in the future, right? Like where we're growing. So yeah, it's just amazing to see how adaptable we are as human beings and how we can find these places that we just feel comfortable and we can nurture our own selves. So yeah, so I felt like that when I was growing up with my parents, and that's a home that I always can come back. When I go and visit them, there is some things missing, but it's still there. In Costa Rica, I felt like home too, surrounded by 72 different strangers that later on became family. And now the whole world has these different portraits or these different faces that I recognize because all my friends are from different parts of the world. Mm-hmm. And then going to Idaho, I call that place home too. And when I came to Spokane, now this is my home. And when I went to Mexico, I had the opportunity to also find home in like these places where I can find these common things with other people, even when our cultures are so different. So I found that fascinating, and that's something that I always ask people about. And it's great to see the way that they interpret, those experiences and how they somehow build that space where they feel comfortable and they fulfill themselves, and they bring other peoples into their family, and they become this extended family that goes beyond blood restrictions.
That's really hitting home for me, having been in Australia for the last year, which is as far away from home that I've ever been, to paraphrase a Hobbit. And that kind of the physical space versus the internal or emotional space of home.
Exactly.
To quote one of my podcasting heroes, Esther Perel, she always says that the quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. And I think that that's something that is so true, and that I've really found more so after having left the States. And having left that beautiful, incredible community that I had in Seattle. And, as you say, like there's this, we live in a time where we can have family throughout the world, chosen family and blood family. And there is a sense of comfort and kind of wonder in that. But having a home where you are is also really important as well. And that has to come from the relationships that you have where you are.
Yeah, no, and it's beautiful because it's that moment when you actually go out of your place, the place that you grew up, and you go and you immerse yourself into a different culture, when you start identifying or realizing these things that make you, and also it makes you realize like how influenced you are from the place where you grew up. Like I feel that the fact that I went out of Venezuela, like it allowed me to really rediscover my own culture and really understand about what it meant to be Venezuelan. Mm-hmm. And then when I go back, I can also celebrate those moments too, like because I can identify that, I can share it with people, and I can point out those things to them, and somehow we can honor them all together. So yeah, no, I totally get what you mean.
Speaking of Venezuela, can you tell us a little bit about printmaking in Venezuela? And if there's a strong community, the tradition there? I realized I don't really know much about it.
Yeah, me neither, which is great. So this is what happened. So I was writing my thesis, from when I was doing my grad school, my master's in fine arts in U of I, and I was just trying to find information about printmaking in Venezuela, and I couldn't find anything in the internet. So it was like, wow, like this is something that is not happening, or what? So I haven't met any printmakers from Venezuela. But then when I went back home, my hero Rosana Farias, the illustrator that I love, she sent me an invitation to apply to a show in this how's it called, in this printmaking shop called Taga in Caracas that I never heard about. So I sent my work, and then when I went back to Venezuela in June, I was like, wow, I really need to see where this place is, because I never heard anything about that. So I went, and the outside was still like being built and stuff. And when I walk inside, Miranda, it just like opened up my eyes, and it was like a little kid in Christmas.
Oh.
It was this beautiful atelier that, I mean, it's just amazing. The equipment there, they have Charles brands, they have all these amazing like presses, for lithography, for relief, for, also screen printing and all these things. And it's a beautiful house that Luisa Palacios put together a while ago, that now is run by master printmaker Norma Morales. They just showed me around, and it was amazing because I felt that what I thought. I mean, I couldn't believe that Venezuelans were not making prints. I couldn't find it. But then when I saw that, it just hit me.
Yeah.
We have a really rich history also in printmaking. It's just that for the last 30 years, people haven't really write about. So that's why they don't know. So when I went there and they saw my enthusiasm, I mean, because I was just like so excited about like getting to see my people there.
Yeah.
So we got there and we printed and stuff. We just talk about it, and they give me a bunch of catalogs, and they show me their collection, and it was great to see me, in that space, surrounded by all my heroes from Venezuela, all the most important like artists from Venezuela in a period of their careers. They went to that print shop and did some printmaking. You can see works by Venezuelan artists Gego, Alirio Palacios, and it's just amazing. Norma Morales. So it was great to find that connection, and then it just it personally makes me excited. I mean, there is that gap that we haven't told our story to the world about printmaking in Venezuela, and now that might be the moment to do so. Because when I go to HGCI, like I see, the Mexican printmaking being represented. I see the American printmaking being represented. I see maybe some European artists also showing there. But then, like, what about this tiny country, that is so rich there in printmaking too, that have their voice being like presented? So that's something that I'm looking to contribute, and also to help out, like to bring that Venezuelan narrative of printmaking into the world to see, especially here in the United States too. So that's something that I'm looking forward to go back and continue developing some research with this printmaking shop. It was amazing. Yeah. I'm still, very excited about it.
I can hear it. I love it. And so do they have like an Instagram or anything that people could follow?
Yes. So the Instagram is Taller Taga, TALLERTAGA. One of our biggest artists, who is Carlos Cruz Diaz, who recently died, he also had printed there. So it was just amazing to know that all the different artists that I always loved, like somehow in a period of their time, they were all there in that space.
What a great connection. Oh, I love it.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, well, I'll definitely, like I said, I'll link to that so people can follow them, and looking forward to seeing, any research or anything that you end up producing or portfolios. Let me know, and I'd love to help share it, because that sounds like we want to know what's happening. It sounds like really good stuff.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
No, thank you. And in this point, I would like to thank you for doing this, doing this podcast, because I feel that for printmaking to continue growing, and also for many people for more people to appreciate it, that is this part of education, right? Like, let them know what exactly the process is, so then later on they can appreciate the print, right? They can understand what it is in front of them, and they can appreciate it fully. So I thank you for doing that through the podcast, and also like bringing so many inspiring stories, through this media, and sharing it with us, because it makes you feel that you're not alone. Like, printmaking can be very solitary, right? Like, you're carving this piece of wood all day, like, without no one, and then there is these beautiful moments of community when you print, like, with other people, right? Like in asphalt, using the asphalt roller, or any other collaboration printing, and then you have that opportunity to make that connection and educate others about it. But thank you for that, for doing this.
Well, thank you for saying so. It's been my absolute pleasure. I think that on that note, I know that you're also, a true believer like myself, and are about the proselytizing, spreading the gospel of print.
Exactly.
And you've got a couple of ways that you're doing that in Spokane, and I would love to hear you talk about that. And so you've got Spokane Print Fest, but then you've also started a community shop there or something. Like, just tell me all the things that you're doing and what's happening in Spokane at the moment.
Yeah, so I moved to Spokane. I realized when I was in my tiny apartment how spoiled I was when I was in the university of having the presses, everything, in order to make my work. So when I found myself in the floor of my kitchen carving a piece of linoleum, I was like, wow, like I didn't realize like how many materials, were involved in it. I knew about it, but somehow you don't think about them until you don't have them, right? So what made me realize is that not everybody has access to these things. So that's why I applied for a grant for the Spokane Arts, and I got a grant to open what is called RGC Prints, which is a small printmaking shop where I can do my work, but also to bring other people into the process and for other people to print. But when I was developing that idea, I got contacted by a group of artists, also and printmakers in Millwood, which is really close here in Spokane. They were like, hey, we do letterpress and screen printing. We want to move into downtown. So we were like, okay, maybe we should, come together and do this thing, right? And then we have our friend Derek Freeland, who is animator, illustrator, and also board game designer. And he does all this it's called Nerdcraft. So he also wanted to join us because he was looking for the space too. And then we have our friend Dorian, who is a master in bookbinding and publication. So all of us came together, found this space, that Tom Caraway, one of the Millwood members, found. And it's now this big space where we have all the presses, for Relief and Intaglio. We have letterpress, and also we have screen printing, publishing, board game designing, illustration, digital printing, and bookbinding. So it's this space that we put together to educate the community around Spokane, and also to open it for them to explore the process of printmaking. Because, printmaking is limited to, the universities. Those are the ones that have the print shops. But now these ones, you can become a member and you can explore and print and also understand the process. So that's something that's going on. We're offering classes, and it's rolling. We started in April, and it's going great. We're still, developing fundraisers, in order to expand our presses. So if you know anything about a press around the area right here, please let us know.
Yeah.
So we're a nonprofit. We're just developing this thing. And in the meantime, because education is such an important thing in community, I believe that strongly that printmaking is a community builder tool. So that's why, like, I mean, we created this space, but also we have been doing events in association with other galleries to just keep bringing the community together and showing them what the potential of creating narratives can have into the community, right? So that's when my idea hit me. The idea hit me of creating a print fest, like a place where the Spokane Print Fest, where you can, as a viewer, or you can come to this space, and there is all these different people making demonstrations at the same time, like printing live. And so you can see you can see the demonstrations, you can see student work, and then you move into the gallery and you can see professional work. That is the same techniques that you saw previously, but just somehow taken into a next level. So the whole event is somehow to celebrate printmaking for a full month that educates people and introducing into the process. So we did that the first day, the festival, and then every Saturday for the month of April, we were offering a different workshop in the gallery surrounded by this exhibition of prints from the region. And we have a workshop on relief, a workshop on lithography or pronto plate, one in monotypes and one in intaglio. And it was Kevin Haas, Mary Farrell, and Margot Casteven and myself teaching these classes. So, I mean, the whole event was such a success that we are doing it next year. We are incorporating more universities. We had so far last year. This year we had Gonzaga, we have University of Idaho, Washington State University, Emerge Gallery from Coeur d'Alene, Spokane Falls Community College coming together. But next year we're going to be having also Whitworth, we're going to be having the University of Montana coming all the way and representing too. And we hope that this event continue growing because we want to showcase students and also professional artists and educators on the same time and the same place. All of these to educate the people about the process, allow them to understand and enjoy what a print is, and they can be all part of making it too, and they can explore the visual narratives and the visual language through this rich media. But later on, eventually, like also develop our own market here in Spokane. So that's all these things that are happening right now that we're developing to somehow put Spokane in the map, because this is becoming a printing town.
I love
an
it.
art making town. This is no longer that city that, that people were like, oh, you just go there to get stabbed. No, this is a place where you come, and you as a student who is coming out from all these different universities in the area, you now can stay here and you can produce your work and you can develop this, contribute to develop this, the identity and the artistic identity of this town. So that's what's happening here.
I love it. While you were talking about all the things that's going on and like what you're building there, you had a really beautiful turn of phrase that I'm not going to remember exactly, but it was basically about how, printmaking is a tool for community building. And I think that there's something really significant in that, kind of almost to tie it all together in this way of, I think we know that we're in a time in human history when we're more connected than ever, but also more disconnected than ever. Exactly. Where we have friends throughout the world who we met 20 years ago in art school, but we don't know our neighbors. We don't feel like we have someone in our town we could call when we're sick. Who just say, hey, can you get me orange juice? Yeah. But I have 1,500 Facebook friends. And I think in its own way, printmaking and the community around it is an antidote to that, is a way that people in the flesh, person to person, because that's the way printmaking has to happen, really forms bonds and broader reach and broader community that I think that we so desperately need to live whole lives, is to feel that. So and I think that's the success that you're experiencing and the excitement that you have and that Spokane is having around print speaks to that need and the wonderful way that our community in printmaking can address that. So you made me so excited for print in Spokane. I love it.
Yeah, now you need to come and see it by yourself, like
I do.
through your own eyes.
I
Yeah,
was just thinking that. I was like, oh, I gotta go
exactly.
now.
Especially coming from here, right? And also, like with that, continuing that idea of community, all these different projects will not happen with the help of others. Like the Print Fest, it was an idea that I had, but then I pitched it in with one of our organizations here called Terrain, that they help out, to make it happen. Then like the In Rally that we do in Coeur d'Alene, we do it in association with the Emerge Gallery. And we just developed our first printmaking competition in the region, where we're trying to motivate emerging artists and students, to submit their work and also get gallery shows. Then the Spokane Print and Publishing Center, we have been developing, with the association, all the different people, the founders coming together, but also other organization like Spark Central, So these things, all these different things happen because we are able to ask for help. When we open up ourselves to ask for help for others, like, it's just amazing what happens. Like they are probably thinking something similar and they're willing to help you out. But what is happening here in Spokane, I feel, is like everybody's so excited about what's going on. They're just so supportive. We do a new event and people is going there to see it. We do a Spokane Print Fest and they're going to be there. They do, a new brewery opens and people's going to be there. It's like they're embracing what is happening here because they are feeling proud of what is being produced here. I feel that that's another thing too that community like also makes.
And it all in a broader sort of social trend way, it all to me speaks to the decentralization of creative practice and the decentralization of power in this really great way. So it's not like, well, there are two galleries and they're owned by rich white guys. And if they don't like you, people aren't seeing your work. Or, there's one brewery and, if you're not in with that brewery, well, then fuck off. Like, it's just like I think that people more and more, I'm loving seeing this trend of creative capital, creative energy. All of that is flowing kind of outward as people are seeking that to find something that feels like they can be a part of it. And
exactly,
it's such an exciting time to have that and to be people who are like you and I are both people who are trying to build something. And it's such a beautiful time to be building something. Yeah,
exactly. And it's just amazing to see when you do that. I mean, and I'm going to be talking about printmaking again. Like you do this event and you empower, you feel how the process empowers people and they feel that they can tell their own stories. They can associate each other with other people and ask for help. But at the same time, they can take control of their own environment. They live here and they can actually make something happen. They can build actively into their community. And that empowerment is what makes the biggest changes.
Yeah.
And we are seeing that happening here. It's tangible.
I absolutely
it's just
love
great.
it.
Yeah, and it's not only me. It's not only us in the Spokane Print Publishing Center. It's also, the people from La Resistance, doing their own thing. All the different chefs that are coming from here in the Spokane and staying here to develop their ideas and creating things that are truly from the region. In that with our school teachers, happening with our students in Eastern Washington University and all these things. It's just amazing.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. But before we sign off completely, would you please let people know where they can find you, follow you, learn about the wonderful print happenings in Spokane, all the things?
Well, so my personal Instagram is RGC Prints. And also I have my personal website, which is reinaldogilzambrano.com. Spokane Print and Publishing Center has its own Instagram. It is called Spokane Print. And also you can find SpokanePrint.com. sorry, .org. And that is the website for that specific area. And I'm still developing more about the Spokane Print Fest. And I hope that if you're in the region, please keep an eye out for April and May, because this is going to happen again. And if you want to be part of it, please do it. I mean, come over and try maybe taking a class or just printing or doing a demo or just being here. I mean, it's a lot of things happening. So yeah, no, but that will do it. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. Thank you. Here. It was such a pleasure. And we'll be in touch, and I'll put a link to everything that you mentioned in the show notes. So thank you.
That's awesome. No, thank you, Miranda. I appreciate it.
Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again in 2 weeks' time when my guest will be Peter Lancaster, and for the 1-year anniversary episode of Pie and Copper Lime. It kind of only seems fitting to ring in my 1-year anniversary with my first Australian guest, despite the fact that I've been recording this podcast in Australia since the beginning. And while Peter has been a collaborative printmaker down under for decades, I was lucky to chat with him as he's in the process of setting up a new, incredible print residency in Fiji, where he grew up. You will not want to miss this one. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you in 2 weeks.